Hey, welcome back to Crazy Shit in Real Estate. I'm your host, Leigh Brown. For those of y'all watching online, welcome to the new video version of the show. As you know, I'm learning from people who do this better than I that y'all like to look at people. And so now you can look at me and see my messy office, but then you see my guest today, Bill Matter. He doesn't have a messy office because he's temporarily on a sabbatical we might call retirement. We don't know what he's going to do next. But if you are new to the show and you can't see us, go over to YouTube. But my listeners on Audible and on iTunes, hey, it's normal. Welcome to Crazy Shit in Real Estate, a weekly podcast where I walk you through some of the wildest, most unbelievable stories you'll hear from the world of real estate. If you like real estate and you love crazy, this is the podcast for you. I've got Bill Matter on the show, and y'all need to know that he's one of the bright shining lights in real estate and has been for a long time. He's recently announced a retirement from his association in Canada, but of course, Bill's too young and too smart to stay retired for long. But Bill, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for saying yes.
Well, thank you, Leigh. Thanks for asking. As I said, I'm pretty excited. I've never been on a big time show like this before.
Y'all, he says big time, but isn't that funny? Because I really don't have any sponsors yet. Although if you know somebody wants to sponsor me, let me know. This is just my passion project. Bill, I love helping people see real estate differently. And you've had a career built on that. So why don't you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself, how you fell into real estate, how long you messed around with it, and whatever background you want to share.
Okay, well, it's a long story, so I won't tell you the whole thing right away. But I did. I've got, this is actually 40 plus years in the business. I started got my license in 19, yeah, I started at 11, exactly. Yeah, you didn't have to have your driver's license back then. No, I got my real estate license 1979 up here in Canada, in Manitoba, which is borders on North Dakota. One of the states I know you said you'd still like to get to, but
it's
anyway.
The only one. Jill, if you're listening, somebody get me to North Dakota or Manitoba. Maybe you can get me to Manitoba and they'll slide me over the line or something. Help me out.
Oh, sure. It's very
me.
close. The folks in Winnipeg, I'm sure, would be glad to have you. Manitoba and Winnipeg, some really good friends there. Anyway, started in 1979. It was really the first job I ever had. I did work. I won't tell you too much about my college experience because it ended badly, but I went right into real estate right after I was, I asked very kindly not to return to college after a couple of years of fun partying and playing hockey and things like that. But it was actually, it worked out all right. I ended up into real estate at 22 years old, long hair, Camaro GT with fat tires on the back. And
are you serious? I can't even picture this.
Absolutely. Anyway, that was me at 22. Got started in real estate. Struggled for a couple of years. I'm not going to lie. It was not. I mean, for a 22-year-old kid, didn't have a lot of friends that were in the position to buy a house. But anyway, it worked out all right. A couple of years of work, and then it started to turn around. I got into the management side of the business. Was fortunate enough to be asked to be a partner of a Century 21 franchise in Canada. Just as the RE/MAX business was getting started in Canada, and we had to fight every day to keep our people staying with us instead of going to RE/MAX. And I'll get back to that later. But anyway, 14 years in the business, I had an opportunity to become CEO of a local board. I was the president of the local board in 89-90. Our CEO left the following year. I hope it wasn't my fault, but anyway, she decided not to. And I was going through some family things at the time. I had a 4-year-old daughter, and I thought at the time, I found out later it might not have been as great, but I thought at the time I'd be able to spend more time with our family, and wasn't running around looking after salespeople and doing that. So I did decide. It was a tough decision to leave the sales side of things, or the management side, but I did go to the association side in 1993. So 26 years later, I have I started with the local board, and then I had the opportunity to go to the provincial association, which would be comparable to your state association, as their CEO. So I I did that to Saskatchewan here, which again borders North Dakota and Montana, just for your geography, folks. And I've been there. I was CEO here for 19 years, 2001 until just December 31st last year. And the reason I'm no longer working there, very, very friendly parting. We've been working on an amalgamation, or in your terms, a merger of the two large boards in the provincial association. We got that finally together after a few years' work, and three associations, three CEOs. When you merge into one, you only need one CEO. And I was quite happy to pass the reins on to another younger fellow who's going to do a great job. And I'm now, watching fondly as they show the success of the new organization, and also looking for a job.
I imagine you could do plenty of consulting, strategic planning, leadership training. There's so many opportunities for somebody like you.
I'd love to do that, and I'm looking at all of those opportunities and have a couple more. And I've just spent, actually, this is the end of the first month of unemployment for me in over 40 years. So I'm finding that I'm not that well suited to unemployment. So I'm looking to find a couple of things that I can pick up on, and I'd be happy to work for any of the boards that are out there listening.
So does that come from inside the house, where you have somebody in the house who says, Bill, go back to work, please?
Well, no, actually my wife is still working, and she's a legal assistant here in Saskatoon, and is quite happy. She works 3 days a week. And
that's
I think
a nice gig.
She wants me out of the house all 5, quite frankly.
So, in looking at all those years, obviously you have different perspectives on the business. And I want to ask you about something we don't get to talk about a lot, because many of my guests, as you know, have been in the business. The ones that are long in the tooth are 20 years. A 41-year veteran is definitely more rare. And for the record, my dad got his license in 78, and his episode is one of the highest rated and most downloaded versions, because the young people do value the words of their elders, despite what the media would tell you. I think people enjoy learning about the past. But in 79, when you came in, you were young, and now that's not a detriment like it was then. And real estate was just conducted differently. So what did you learn in your first really challenging years of real estate, when you were definitely the odd man out being young?
Yeah, it was really interesting. And again, one of the main prospecting techniques is your sphere of influence. Of course, that still is probably the greatest one. And at that time, most of my sphere of influence was more interested in the bar on Friday and Saturday than looking at houses on Friday and Saturday. So, or Monday, Tuesday. But anyway, I had to go outside of that sphere of influence, and sometimes they're parents. And actually, I was kind of fortunate. Some of my family friends and family connections and parents of friends that were interested in buying. But it was also a very difficult time. I mean, you would have had it as well, but our interest rates in Canada at that time were in the 17 to 21% range.
Right.
I sold a house. I signed a deal where they locked in a 5-year mortgage at 21%. And they said they had to, because they thought it was going to go to 30. So, those were the realities. We found other ways of putting deals together. Assumption of mortgages was something, a much bigger thing back then, but you just had to find other ways. And the other thing I had to do was just get out there and, I cold called, I door knocked, I did a lot of those things. And your folks would laugh about this today, but I remember going on a listing presentation carrying, I think it was an 8mm projector that had a little screen on it that showed the wonders of the Century 21 system. And I guess that's something, you'll appreciate this from a large franchise, that whether it's Remax, Century 21, Royal LePage, Coldwell, those companies or those franchises have something for you that I just bought into it, and I used that presentation, and a lot of people, they didn't understand. I was popping up this screen on their kitchen table in a small town Canada, that they just didn't, they thought that I had something there, and I presented and I delivered for them. But, it was just finding the people out there that were wanting to do business.
You did the work. I mean, that's what it boils down to in real estate. It's, are you willing to do the daily work? And then are you willing to use the tools you have? And I'm pretty sure that in your office, other people had access to the slideshow and the projectors, and they weren't using it because for whatever reason, in their mind, they had a bias against that because it's not what they had always done. And you see that same thing repeat itself in association life, which I'm sure you've experienced that not just as a volunteer leader, but as the leader of the organization, that pervasive attitude of, but this is the way we've always done it. And I think that's what holds real estate and real estate professionals back to an extent. What would you say helps you move volunteers and members and other association staff past that built-in bias against change?
Yeah, that's a good one. And one of my least favorite sayings is, "But we've always done it this way." And
Drives me crazy.
Yeah, it drives me nuts as well. And I just have always liked to try new things and present new things to directors. And you know, they didn't always work that great. And you know, you just had to keep going. And I guess at some point you have to develop a trust in your leadership that they will go along with you on things that they might think is a little different. But we've always, again, and I think it's something really important with volunteer leaders is to get a very strong orientation at the beginning of their terms and talk to them about what is expected of them and what they should expect of you, kind of build that level of trust. But we've always, and again, I've been very fortunate. I've had 26 presidents and boards of directors over the years, and I can probably count on one hand and probably less than one hand the ones that we had trouble with. You know, there's lots of egos out there. I mean, you know, our business, we're type A people. I think possibly having come from the business, I know a little bit about what the day-to-day business is like. So, you know, how those folks feel every day, and, you know, you can and can't get away with some things with them. They need their time to do their business, but just learning to work with people and having them trust you is probably the best thing. And that works in the sales side of it too.
And that's always funny because if you watch a realtor leader in their day-to-day life, they are blinders on, looking for a sale, looking for a buyer, and they're very alone, lone wolves, to use Canadian animals. And then you bring them into association and volunteer life. You have to take off the blinders. You're never a lone wolf because you're always in the pack. And in fact, you're leading the rest of the pack. So they have to make a giant shift from day-to-day business into leadership life. What you say is the biggest challenge in getting somebody out of this space into this space? Because frankly, Bill, that's probably the solution to all of society's ills right now. So I need you to solve the planet for us. So how do we go from here to here? And we're going to rely on your sage wisdom to bring that to us.
Okay, no pressure.
Jeff Turner is listening right now, and he would particularly like the answer to this. And so, Jeff, this is for you.
Well, I'd be surprised if Jeff doesn't know the answer already. He's just saving it up till somebody asks
Probably.
him when he's on the show. Anyway.
He hasn't been on the show. Let me write that down. Go ahead,
he
Bill.
needs
Tell
to
us
be
the
on.
answer to life.
No, I guess it's, and this is something I've always wanted, or always wanted to let everybody, or just pass along, is that it's just, you have to get along with people. And a director, and, you know, the director moving into the leadership positions, moving into the chair, you need to think of everybody else. If you have a 10 or 12 member board of directors, you have to realize that they're not all like me. And that's what, one of the things I used to do was have, you know, and whether you believe in Myers-Briggs or the DISC personality ones, I always used to have everybody try and understand each other. The Myers-Briggs was one of the best. And I did that with staff and directors, that they understood each other. They said, you know what, maybe I don't think the way they think, and I don't react to things the way they do. So if you understand each other and how you react and how you think, then you can work together with each other. The other thing that, and again, it sounds so simple, but its bottom line is, who are you working for? And you know, who are we there in the best interests of? And again, I always considered my board of directors and leadership as a team. And I'm, again, from the sports analogies, working as a coach to try and get the team to perform at its best. you got to remember what your goal is and who you're working for. And, you know, the members are who we work for. And again, as an agent, your clients are who you're working for. I mean, I saw an article the other day, and it was great, and I forget who it was, but they said, we've gotten away from services for the clients, and we're moving towards services for the salespeople. And again, I always thought if our board, our association could do something for our members that would help them serve their clients better, that's what we all need to be focused on. Anyway, and I have to say, I have to give a shout out. I heard your session with Sean Carpenter the other day, and I just love the 3 things you need to do. And I think I wish I'd heard it a long time ago. And I need to meet Sean. I know we have a lot of common friends, and I've never met him in person. But his 3 things about build relationships, solve problems, and have fun. I mean, I couldn't put it any better than that. But anyway, just understanding
and
each other.
He's a very good speaker, and he has a passport, so you could tell your association they'll bring him up to do a class. He's delightful, and your members would love him, or their members would love him.
Yeah.
But what's your Myers-Briggs?
You know, I don't remember, and I'm sorry.
Bill, come on, you're killing me here.
I'm an empath of some sort. I'm actually the facilitator that did it for us told us I was one of these rare small percentage ones that's you know, driven, but also highly empathetic. And, you know, I do care a lot about our people and my staff and my directors, but I also have a bit of a drive to get stuff done.
I'm a small percentage too, but doesn't include all the empathy. I'm an INTJ. I think I'm pretty high on the J. It's like one of my strengths. But there's not many INTJs out there.
Yeah, I'll have to, you know what, I have to look it up. And remember, I'm over 60 now.
La, 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 la. Only Clairol knows how old I am. So I want to know, of course, the premise of our show is the crazy shit in real estate. And you could go in like a million directions. And I know that you're retired-ish, but you won't say names because you wouldn't have even in your real world if you weren't allowed to. But what would you say is the craziest thing you ever saw, whether it's as a practicing realtor, as a volunteer leader, as a manager, as an association executive, all those different angles? What was the one thing you saw that you went home and said, you're never going to believe this, to your wife who doesn't really want to hear it, but you had to tell somebody? Well,
I guess, I mean, I've been spending a bit of time on this. I mean, to pick one is almost impossible, but I think I'll go back, and I'm going to go back to showing houses. And this is going back into the early 80s probably. And it involves a rental property I was showing. Actually, I think it was a referral from my boss. And this was a couple and they were actually a very highly respected couple in the community. They were building a new house, big new house, and they needed a place to live in the interim. They'd sold theirs and needed a rental for 6 months or so while theirs was being, the big one was being built. Anyway, I get in the house and it was a rental owned by one of our clients, and had been empty for a little while, but we get in the door and we walk in, and it's okay, but it's empty and looking a little rough. But by the time we walked from the front door into the kitchen, the client, the couple, the wife, started saying, there's something wrong. I think it was when anyway, we had our shoes off. We walked in front to back, and by the time we got to the back, as I said, she's feeling something, and we all looked down, and from feet to ankles and a little higher up, we're covered in fleas. Fleas had taken over the house, and we got out of there as fast as we could. I got home, and we sent everybody on their way. We weren't going to rent that one, that's for sure. Got home, and I took my stuff off in the garage and walked into the house, and we tried to do everything, but it ended up invading our house as well. I think I would say I'm probably one of the few people that's ever given fleas to their dog. And we had to actually have the exterminators come in and do the bomb and that gas thing in the house and everything. But it was just it wasn't a bad house. It was just they had pets and left behind, and it was they just had the opportunity to take over. But it just covered, and quite often actually the client, the customer at that time, he is now a member of government in Manitoba, and I still see him from time to time at the lake. And I haven't asked him about it, but I do. I can only imagine that story going back. And he's a very successful businessman, and I can only imagine him telling his friends at a cocktail party what happened when Bill showed him this house to rent.
So there's a couple of things I have to point out here. The first one is, obviously in your early days of real estate, nobody told you to wear pantyhose because you can wipe the fleas off. That was one of the first things I learned, was that's why you wear pantyhose, because the fleas get stuck on the outside of the lycra. So if you ever go show property again, you should know that's why they exist. But the thing that strikes me the most is you were handed this opportunity probably because showing rentals is not profitable and is time consuming, and you're just not going to make much money. And so as a young person who's scrapping to survive, you'll pretty much take anything. But you look at this person all those years ago was a tenant, and they were looking at a flea infested property, and you're still doing the best job you can for them. You had no way of knowing 35 years ago that if you fast forward, that this is an elected official who's probably very financially sound, and you're still able to have a conversation with him because you treated him with dignity and respect and kindness when he was at a different place in life. And I think there's a whole thing we could unwrap there about why some realtors survive and thrive over decades and others flare out. And I think it all goes back to that respect and dignity that you show to the person you make the least amount of money on, not because you're going to know them 40 years later, and not because they're going to be an elected official, and not even just in case they become one, but because it's the right thing to do at that time. And I love that, because you can agree with me on this. We see this with our best professional realtors, no matter what country they're in or state or province they're in. The best ones look at the humanity and not the dollars.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I tell one more small story? And actually, I got another one about.
Anything you want to tell, Bill? You're one of my favorites. You get extra credit.
This one just goes to your point, and I do remember, and your listeners will laugh at this, the numbers involved, but I do remember. It's the same type of thing, but I sold a house. I listed a property for $12,900. It was a house. It was a full-on house. It needed some work. It had, this is appliances included and everything. But I did the same amount of work for that as I would have for a larger value property. And again, at that time, the average price in my community was around 100. But that house sold for $12,900. People could buy it on their credit card today. But less than 6 months later, the same couple called me with a referral for a $150,000 house that a friend of theirs, and they said, you did this for us. And a lot of, we could have called a lot of other people. They wouldn't even have taken that listing. But, it led to more business. So it's, whatever the numbers relate to today, whatever at the bottom end, I don't think certainly anybody starting out should take or think they should not take a listing, or if they're not going to look after it, they shouldn't take it. But the value shouldn't matter, and that's what your point is, as long as you look after the people. I have to put in one story about my leadership too, if I can. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this happened to me twice in the last 20 years, and it actually happened fairly consecutively. But our boards of directors, especially provincially or statewide, there's a lot of travel involved in the meetings, and we had a monthly or every 2 months meeting. But
and we should point out it's unpaid travel. They might get a reimbursement, but these volunteers are not paid to invest this time to go to meetings. So just for the record, they're doing it out of the love of the organization. Small
reimbursement for their time and for their travel expenses, for sure. And yeah, the money that goes, the value that volunteers put in. And this is where another bit of reimbursement comes in. But it was 4 years, or it was 4 consecutive years, or years where our president and past president ended up together as a couple. And it's like
romantically?
Yes. So it was, I don't know if it was exactly that, but it was like two past presidents ended up with presidents for years. And again, I didn't notice, and I had no idea. And of course, people around me are saying, well, what are you, you're not watching this at all? But anyway, they were, and I will not mention the names, but if any of them are watching, they probably will know who they are. And they're quite happy today. But
right, so they're still together? So there's longevity in this?
Well, one couple for sure, and the other I'm not 100% sure. But the only thing I said to them after I did find out is, say, well, why didn't you tell me so we could have saved money on the rooms, you know?
That is spoken like a true association executive right there.
Yeah, for sure. I had also one other one on budget. When you talk about budgets, we had a couple of years where, and I've had years where I'm trying to stay ahead of the bank overdraft. I've had lots of years where we had significant reserves, but I also had years where we're watching to make sure we could cover payroll with the overdraft. But one year we were looking at expenses and how we could cut, and we were talking about reducing travel expenses, and maybe some of the males or some of the females could share rooms on trips. And we travel a lot with our presidents, and a lot more than the board of directors. But I ended up, I happened to notice a cartoon, and I'm a big fan of Dilbert, Scott Adams.
Oh yeah, I love Scott Adams.
And who isn't? But anyway, I happened to catch one that I thought was very timely, and I sent it to our president, and it was Dilbert and Wally, or whoever, it was two of them talking about the same thing about cutting expenses and travel. And the question was, do you spoon on the right or on the left? I sent it to our president, and they never raised the issue of sharing rooms again. So.
So there you go, people in leadership. That's the trick to shutting that conversation down. Add the simple question, do you spoon right or left? It's simple question asking, right, Bill?
Exactly.
So, Bill, if anybody's looking to reach you, they want to know more about what you can do as far as consulting, leadership training, strategic planning, or just want to hear some stories about Canadian real estate life, how can people reach you?
Probably the easiest is Gmail. I'm billmatter@gmail.com. Very simple. They can text me. I know you're gonna say in a couple of minutes that you're gonna put the contact information in the notes. So, but I won't give you my phone number, but it'll be up there. I'm happy to take a call or a text from anyone. I know there is a bit of an issue in working in the U.S., but I'm happy to do work from here and sneak across the border once in a while. I don't expect anybody from Border Services is listening, but
if they are, I'll be fascinated, because I'm kind of convinced that the government is watching me at all times because I'm kind of mouthy. So then I'll have it confirmed. So there you go, Border Security. If y'all go after Bill, then I know that the NSA is looking after me. But we do have Zoom, so you people could video conference him in. There is a way to work this out, and you would not be disappointed if you had some of Bill's perspective. And Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you letting this be your first podcast episode, and especially your first one post temporary retirement.
Thanks a lot, Leigh. Always appreciate it, and love your speaking, and I hope we can catch up at some point in the next few months.
I look forward to it. Okay, friends, I hope y'all enjoyed it and had fun. If you want to come on the show, I'm at Leigh Brown on Twitter. Be careful, it's political dumpster fire over there. But the happier places are, of course, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, give me 5 stars, and I'll see you next time. If you are listening to this episode and you need to tell us something about your crazy life in or around real estate, then tweet me at Leigh Brown or reach me on any of the social networks. That's if you're a broker, realtor, investor, inspector, lender, or just a regular, normal human being who happens to have dealt in real estate. Subscribe for more episodes, and as always, we are thrilled that you joined us for some crazy shit in real estate. See you next time.